It's been a long while since a FNAF theory really shook the entire community. Not just some speculative idea or a minor timeline tweak, but something that genuinely tried to explain everything. The minigames, the shifting art styles, the contradictions, all of it. But back in 2015, MatPat released a video that tried to do the impossible and solve Five Nights at Freddy's. He looked at the timeline, the gameplay, the hidden clues, and somehow managed to stitch it all together into a single theory. One built around something that no one expected. The Dream Theory. For a moment, it felt like everything clicked. It explained the weird visuals, it explained the weird retcons, it even explained why FNAF 4 was so different. And for 1 week, this video was the answer. So what happened? How did a single video manage to convince an entire fandom that FNAF had been solved? And why did that idea completely fall apart right after? Let's take a look at the theory that solved FNAF for a week. By the time FNAF 4 released, the series wasn't just a few spooky games anymore, it was a full phenomenon. The community was huge, the theories were endless, and every new teaser from Scott turned into a week-long event. FNAF had built its reputation for hiding deep lore in every pixel, and fans were constantly trying to piece it all together like it was some giant mystery box. But the thing is, up to that point, nothing had actually been confirmed. The games gave us just enough to start forming connections, but never enough to say anything for sure. And that uncertainty was part of the fun.
Hey! Stop! Who? Stop! Don't!
Every new game wasn't just a sequel, it was another piece to the puzzle. Or at least that's how it felt. FNAF 4 dropped right in the middle of this. It was darker, more surreal, and way more confusing than the previous entries. The animatronics were terrifying, the jump scares were aggressive, and the setting wasn't just a pizzeria anymore. Instead, it was a child's bedroom. But it wasn't just the setting that threw people off. The game barely explained anything. You weren't playing as a guard, there were no security cameras, and everything from the nightmarish enemies to the cryptic minigames felt disconnected from what came before. People weren't just trying to figure out the mechanics, they were trying to figure out what any of it meant. Everyone was looking for some kind of answer, and that's why the Dream Theory hit so hard when it showed up. Whether you believed it or not, it changed the way people looked at the entire series. It was late 2015, and Scott Cawthon posted 3 sentences on his website. No context, no updates, just 3 simple lines. What is seen in shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child. Why is tiny toy Chica missing her beak? 4 games, 1 story. Most people read that and felt more confused. MatPat read it and decided to blow up everything. His theory was that the entire series, everything from FNAF 1 to 4, was never real.
What if everything in FNAF was just a dream?
It wasn't about haunted suits or security guards or even killer robots. It was the twisted imagination of a child, the crying child, either in a coma, dying, or already gone. He started in the FNAF 4 bedroom. That room was the key. It was where we saw the plushies, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, all lined up like a toy display. Mango was literally a torn up Foxy toy the crying child's sister played with. Foxy being out of order was the brother ripping the plushie in half and mocking him. It wasn't symbolism, it was a straight pipeline from memory to nightmare. Then there were the minigames. In one, the kids saw an employee in costume, bathed in purple shadow from the stage lights. To a scared child, that person became the Purple Man. Not evil, just misinterpreted. Shadow Freddy, Shadow Bonnie, and Purple Guy were all figments of how a young brain processed stage lights and fear. This was where the theory started to make sense. FNAF's weirdest design choices suddenly became logical, as if a kid was dreaming them. Springtrap got pulled into it too. In one scene, a child showed him a spring lock finger puppet shaped like yellow Bonnie, and said, "Careful, it might pinch your finger." Combine that with the urban legends about hiding bodies in suits, and you suddenly had Springtrap, a nightmare version of a playground rumor, visualized by a terrified mind. And then came the clock. In FNAF 1 through 3, every night ended with a chime from a grandfather clock. That exact clock existed right outside the crying child's hallway. The logic was simple. Every night we survived in those games, that was the crying child waking up at 6 AM. But after the bite of 83, when he was hospitalized, the bell was gone, replaced with a harsh beeping. The implication was that the earlier games were him dreaming from home. FNAF 4 was him slipping away in a hospital bed. MatPat even tied it to Scott's infamous box. That locked box would reveal everything if the community was ready for it. And maybe they weren't, because if it was all a dream, that meant none of it really happened. The spirits, the murders, the whole Fazbear franchise, it was fiction within fiction. And that was where people split. MatPat said he hated dream twists, but for once, the evidence left no other answer. FNAF 1's animatronics were barely explained until you realized they were just toys in a kid's room. FNAF 2's toy characters were literal toys. The shadows and purple sprites were stage lightings. And the end of night chimes were real world sounds bleeding into dreams. And suddenly everything clicked. And for about a week, it felt solved. Subreddits pinned timelines, YouTubers called it the end of the mystery. People didn't agree on whether it was a good ending, but for once, they weren't arguing about what the ending actually was. And it told fans something important. They didn't miss the clues, they just weren't looking at them from the right perspective. Everything they needed was there, in a bedroom, in a hospital, and in a scared child's mind. The appeal of Dream Theory wasn't in the clues themselves. Instead, it was in the timing and relief it offered. By the end of 2015, the community was exhausted. 4 games in 16 months had turned every frame into a debate topic, but up till now, no debate had ever reached a conclusion. The video hit 3 pressure points at once. First, it gave the fandom a single protagonist to follow. Up to that moment, players kept swapping between faceless guards, pre-recorded phone calls, and silent minigame spirits. Second, the Dream Theory was elegant. It didn't invent new restaurants or extra murders, it recycled what was already on screen. The plushies, the shadows, the clock, then told everyone that they had just been looking from the wrong perspective. Third, the theory seemed developer approved. Scott's cryptic web messages and his locked box posts sounded less like riddles and more like confirmation once you had heard MatPat lay them down against the dream framework. Major FNAF channels immediately shifted from endless speculation to confirmation threads.
But no! No, I have the creeper! It's not Steve! It's not frickin' Steve! If it's Steve, I'm dead! If it's Steve! If it's Steve!
And even skeptics admitted they were tired enough to give the idea a week of peace. For the first time, a majority felt they could play the games without reopening the same rabbit holes. It didn't just answer questions, it promised the conversation was finally over. Of course the calm wouldn't last long. New entries and Scott's later comments would start poking holes almost immediately. But for that short window, Dream Theory did what 4 full games of clues had failed to do. It convinced a tired community that Five Nights at Freddy's was at last solved. The first cracks started to show up fast. Even the people who liked Dream Theory had to admit there were pieces it didn't cleanly cover. If the nights were all a dying kid's dream, how did he know HR notes or corporate policies? Why would a dream resolve ghosts trapped by a murderer? For a few days, everyone tried to handwave those as dream logic, then the series moved on. Sister Location was the real sledgehammer. Hidden behind the keypad and power modules was the private room, a control room that literally monitors the FNAF 4 house. Those grainy cameras pointed straight at the bedroom we'd call the dream. That doesn't read like a coma fantasy, it reads like an actual place on a security feed. The game also anchored things to a real family, a real facility, and a very real body count. Suddenly it wasn't just one kid's nightmare anymore, it was a story with names, addresses, and consequences. FNAF 6 did the next round of damage. It treated the older events as history you could act on, lure the remnants in, salvage them, burn it down. That's not a dream unspooling in a bedroom, that's a finale pulling long threads together on purpose. If Dream Theory was meant to be 4 games, 1 story, FNAF 6 completely ruined it. Even without the later games, there was the creator factor. Scott never opened the box and said it was a dream. In fact, his teases and later nudges leaned the other way. And the more concrete details he added, such as names, dates, rooms you could walk through, the less oxygen Dream Theory had. By the time fans look back, the proof for Dream Theory read like a mood board. Plushies, shadows, clocks, none of them were definitive. The moment Sister Location gave the bedroom a camera feed, the conversation shifted from Dream Theory to actual facts. And once the series committed to that path, there wasn't a clean way to walk it back. So the theory didn't explode, it more deflated. Not because it was lazy, but because the canon kept moving. It solved a puzzle that only existed for 4 games. The next 4 rewrote the rules, and that's how something that felt alright for the first week ended up as a fascinating dead end, a snapshot of where the fandom was, not where the story went. Even after the theory fell apart, fans kept checking for point of view tricks such as unreliable rooms, sounds that bleed in from real life, and meta layers in VR. You can draw a straight line from that mindset to how people approach Dislocation's private room or help Wanda's Glitchtrap. They didn't just hunt Easter eggs anymore, they questioned who was doing the seeing. It also forced cleaner standards for evidence. Before Dream Theory, a lot of lore hinged on vibes, such as shadowy sprites and even pixels on a poster. MatPat's video tries to systemize everything. If a claim didn't line up across visuals, audios, and game logic, it got grilled. You can argue with the conclusion, but the method raised the bar. It even changed the relationship with Scott. Scott's 3 hints suddenly mattered in a new way. Fans started treating creator nudges as lenses, not answers. Even when he stayed quiet, that silence meant something. Later games arrived with more concrete anchors such as names, places, and consequences, and whether or not that was a response, the effect was the same. The series talked to the audience in clearer terms. Dream Theory helped draw that line. Fans proved they'd connect the dots, and the game started drawing some of those dots darker. And there's a softer reason it matters. It gave people a way into FNAF who felt shut out. Not everyone wants a flowchart of murders and minigames. One kid's nightmare is an emotional on-ramp. Even after it stopped being canon viable, it remained a useful lens for rewatching the earlier games because it captures something true about why they felt scary. They were small, helpless, trapped, and trying to control a world that didn't listen. So no, Dream Theory isn't the answer right now, but it's still important as a template, a warning, and a shared reference point. It taught the fandom how to build, and how not to build, grand solutions. It pushed discussions towards perspective, evidence, and intent. And it left us with a question that still pays off in newer entries. Not just what happened in Freddy's, but who is telling it to us and why. For a week, Dream Theory felt like the solution FNAF never gave us. Then Sister Location, Pizza Sim, and everything after pulled the thread, and the theory became undone. But the impact still stuck. It pushed the fandom to read for point of view, to match visuals with audio, to stop treating every pixel as gossip, and start asking who's seeing what and why. As a solution, it fizzled, but as a lens, it aged well. That's where I land. Not the truth, but a turning point. It showed how one clean framework can calm a chaotic mystery, and how fast it can crack when the story keeps moving. Either way, it marked the moment the fandom shifted from hunting monsters to reading perspectives, and that shift still shapes how we talk about Freddy's today.